The 3 kilometers walk at dawn along the deserted country road was long and a bit frightening. Bonnie knew it wasn't safe to go alone, but the pepper spray in her jacket pocket gave her some comfort. She knew that in case of unforeseen danger, she could defend herself. On September 28, 1994, 18-year-old Bonnie Craig woke up at 5 a.m., freshened up, packed her notebooks into her backpack, and, as usual, headed to the bus stop. Bonnie left before sunrise. She had a 45-minute walk to the bus stop. The student liked to be a bit early at the university. Bonnie was born in Calgary, Canada, in 1975. Her biological father played little role in her and her older brother Jason's lives. They were raised by their stepfather, Gary Campbell, who loved the children and treated them as his own from the first meeting. When Bonnie was 5 years old, another son, Adam, joined the family of Karen and Gary, and 2 years later, a daughter, Samantha. The younger sister became like a living doll to Bonnie. She loved dressing the little girl in princess dresses and teaching her the life lessons she herself knew. Gary, the father, worked for many years for an oil and gas company and was regularly transferred to new construction sites. Bonnie attended 6 primary schools and 2 high schools, learning to adapt to changes easily and quickly make new friends. From sunny California with a pool in the backyard, the family moved to snowy Anchorage, then to West Texas, and finally back to the picturesque landscapes of Alaska. Then, Ken and Gary divorced, a sudden change for all the children. Samantha and Adam now spent 1 week with their father and the other with their mother. Bonnie focused entirely on her studies. She also swam, trained in diving, rode horses, wrote poems, and played the violin and viola in the school orchestra. However, the girl's life constantly brought traumatic surprises. Only when her closest friend died in a drunk driving accident did she overcome her parents' divorce. This event changed Bonnie's life forever. She swore never to drink alcohol again and to avoid driving altogether. She walked or took the bus, fearing an accident, and refused to take a driving test. Bonnie even founded a school club against drunk driving. After high school, Bonnie enrolled at the University of Alaska Anchorage to become a psychologist. Her then boyfriend, Cameron Miyasaki, studied architecture at the University of California, Berkeley. They spent a lot of time on the phone and often emailed each other. The house with her mother became increasingly crowded. The woman started dating a man who had 3 children of his own, so Bonnie decided to move into her stepfather's house, where she could be more independent. Additionally, his house was only 15 minutes from her university. 3 days a week, she took the bus to school, walking the 3 kilometers to the bus stop and enjoying the fresh Alaskan air. Bonnie also worked part-time at Sam's Club. The girl had a great interest in life and reason to be optimistic. On September 28, 1994, Bonnie left her stepfather's house to go to the bus stop to get to her college courses. 9 hours later, another student from the University of Anchorage was photographing the landscape on a hiking trail in Chugach State Park. This park is about 24 kilometers from Bonnie's residence. Mid-September is a good time to enjoy the park's surroundings. The weather is still warm enough for Alaska, the days are long, and the beauty of the landscape is captivating. The student focused her camera lens on the picturesque view. Below, something caught her eye, a light blue object floating in the water below a 10-meter cliff. As the girl approached to take a closer look at the object, she made a gruesome discovery. A woman's body was floating lifelessly in the shallow water. She lay face down in an unusual position and was fully clothed. This was an inaccessible section of the McHugh Creek. One could only reach it from the top of a cliff or by walking several kilometers along the riverbed. If someone slipped and fell from above, it would inevitably lead to death. That's what the arriving police also thought. The poor woman who was enjoying the sights and sounds of the beautiful park lost her balance and fell to her death. The body was taken to the coroner, who examined it for injuries and identified it. According to the coroner's report, the girl had drowned. She also suffered severe head injuries, possibly from a fall off a cliff. The investigators identified the deceased as Bonnie Craig, based on the class ring usually worn by graduates in honor of their college or university graduation. The next step was to verify this assumption by contacting the girl's family. The tragic news of their daughter's death reached Karen while on a short trip with her new partner, Jim. They had traveled to a small harbor town for a relative's wedding, where Karen would meet Jim's parents for the first time. The woman enjoyed herself in the company of her future in-laws, laughing and joking, unaware of the horrible fate that had befallen her beloved Bonnie. She and Jim spent the night on a yacht when there was a knock on the door at 3 a.m. Upon hearing the wild news about her daughter, Karen thought it was a prank. How could her studious daughter be alone in the park while college classes were going on? Such news would have been a blow to any parent who cared for their child from birth. But Karen was no ordinary parent. For the last 3 years, she had worked as an undercover police officer for the Anchorage Police Department. She was a police academy graduate working on cases involving the distribution of illegal substances. She was highly regarded in her job for her ability to solve complex problems. Naturally, Karen cared for her children like any other parent, but she primarily had the mind of an investigator. She wanted the case transferred to her department because she didn't believe her daughter's death was just an accident. As she had been told, the woman inquired about the details of the accident. Were there any signs of forced sexual intercourse? To which the police responded that the girl was fully clothed. But that meant nothing, and Karen had to get to the bottom of it. The grieving mother was convinced that her daughter could not have been several kilometers away from home during school hours. Bonnie did not drive, and it was impossible that she would miss her classes. And if she did, there had to be a good reason. Until the last moment, Karen hoped it was a mistake. What shocked her even more was that no evidence had been found at the scene, not even the girl's belongings. It seemed to the woman that the police wanted to dismiss the case as an accident, but she was not ready to give up so quickly. On the first flight to Alaska, Karen went to the identification, still hoping it was not Bonnie and that there was a reasonable explanation why everyone thought it was her daughter who had died. The hardest part was going to the morgue to see the girl's body with her own eyes. Confused, the woman walked down the hallway into the cold room. It was like being in a movie, only now it was real life. With a shaky hand, Karen pulled back the sheet from her face. Her Bonnie lay before her, frozen and lifeless, but it was indeed her daughter. As a mother, Karen felt in her heart that this was no accident, and as a police officer, she wanted confirmation. When she took her daughter's hand and noticed that the girl's knuckles were bruised and swollen, she demanded that the police come and take photographs, as these were clearly defensive wounds. Moreover, this was the last chance for the mother to gather as much information as possible since her daughter would soon be buried. However, the police tried to convince the woman that the injuries were from a fall and took no action. So, Karen decided to take a different approach. She reached out to reporters she knew and launched an information blitz. All the local newspapers jumped on the story of how a young, pretty student was found dead in a creek. The news spread much faster than the investigators could respond. The mother even tried to contact her superiors, but since the time had run out, even he could not help her. The case was outside his jurisdiction. The next day, Karen, Jim, Jason, Adam, and Samantha went to the funeral home to say goodbye to Bonnie. It was hard to see a loved one who had recently been so full of life, now just a body. But the siblings wanted to be with Bonnie one last time to say goodbye. The funeral director asked for a quick decision on which coffin the girl should be placed in. But Karen did not want to risk losing potential evidence. So, she said she wanted Bonnie's body placed in a stone tomb, thinking of the future. The woman would be able to exhume the body if anyone listened to her opinion. The media brought more frustration than help. Karen was called to the police station and asked not to fuel the fire by calling the accident a crime, as this would hinder the investigation. The officers explained that they were just considering all possibilities and did not want to scare away any suspects at this point. The first person on this list was Gary Campbell, Bonnie's stepfather. According to the investigators, the man was supposed to be on a business trip on the day of the tragedy, but for some reason, he returned earlier, and there was a dispute between him and Bonnie. This information baffled Karen even more. Could the man who had raised the girl as his own daughter have done something to her? What would have to happen for Gary to take such a step? When Karen went to her ex-husband's house to pick up her daughter's belongings, the bedroom door was locked. The man accused his ex-wife of theft, claiming she had taken Bonnie's photo without permission and given it to the police. He considered the girl his daughter and could not allow anyone to take his last memory of her. Bonnie's death hit her younger sister Samantha, then 12, very hard. The girl began to struggle in school, unable to concentrate on anything at home. Samantha had shared everything with Bonnie and was now lost without her support. The turmoil surrounding her older sister's death made the girl even doubt her own father. She no longer knew what to believe. One evening, Gary put Samantha to bed. The girl looked at him with frightened eyes and asked, "Did you really take Bonnie's life?" The man was shocked and deeply hurt by these words. But then he pulled himself together and assured Samantha that he would never harm her sister. This reassured the girl. Later, the police asked Adam and Samantha to tell their stories independently, and the children revealed that their father, Gary, was at home on the day of Bonnie's death. He had gone to work long after his sister had left. His whereabouts were confirmed by colleagues and superiors, and the suspicion was diverted from the man. The coroner's investigation revealed that Bonnie had been dead for several hours when found. It was determined that she died from drowning. However, she had suffered several severe head injuries, probably related to a fall from the cliff, or they were caused by a blunt object. The police became interested in how the girl got to the park and thoroughly examined the crime scene. At first, it didn't seem suspicious at all, as Bonnie's death was classified as an accident. But an investigator on the cliff found a sheet with a drop of blood about 1.5 meters from the edge. Tests showed it was the blood of the deceased girl, but how could there be blood if Bonnie was injured in the fall? The police began to consider the possibility of a crime and that Bonnie had not fallen off the cliff accidentally. This case would be complicated, and they would have to proceed cautiously. Therefore, they did not tell the media or the family that they suspected foul play. That was their tactic. They did not want to scare away the perpetrator, assuming it could be someone close to the deceased girl. Therefore, the wave of information triggered by Karen could have hindered the investigation. The day of Bonnie's funeral arrived. The service was held in a church that the student occasionally visited. Bonnie's boyfriend arrived from California. He looked very upset. This was not the meeting he had dreamed of. Even her biological father, Gordon Sigg, appeared. Though he hadn't raised his daughter, he wanted to say goodbye to her. Everyone who loved the smiling girl was there. So Karen decided to conduct her own investigation. She walked the entire route her daughter had taken at dawn, starting from Gary's house. She tried to imagine what Bonnie might have felt, thought about, or noticed that morning. Her mother realized for the first time how unsafe the path the girl took several times a week was. Tall trees surrounded her on both sides. In the darkness, it seemed as if an invisible danger lurked behind each one in the form of a wild animal or a dangerous person. She wondered why Bonnie hadn't asked her father to drive her. She had to walk the 3 kilometers every time. Then, it dawned on her that her daughter was as stubborn as she was. The girl didn't want to bother anyone and tried to handle difficulties independently. Karen had also taught Bonnie from a young age never to get into a car with a stranger. She was sure that if her daughter had accepted a ride, it could only have been with someone she knew and trusted. When the walk yielded no clues, Karen returned to her car and drove around the neighborhood, hoping to find Bonnie's backpack or other items that might lead to a breakthrough in the case. She searched ditches, looked in bushes, and went everywhere but found nothing. The woman began the new year, 1995, with a call to the sergeant in charge of Bonnie's case. She directly asked him if her daughter had been sexually assaulted, and the investigator had no choice but to tell the truth. Karen gained access to her daughter's autopsy report but was asked to keep it strictly confidential. The girl was indeed found clothed. During the medical examination, a swab was taken containing male DNA. There were also injuries to the genitals. However, this information was kept secret because it was not yet clear to whom the DNA belonged. DNA samples were taken from all the men involved in the case, but no matches had been found so far. Several witnesses saw the girl walking towards the bus stop that morning. However, no one saw her board the bus. So how could Bonnie end up in Chugach Park, 24 kilometers from her home, and what was she doing there? The investigators believed she was attacked in the dark. Bonnie's death had now been almost a year ago when Jim's relatives invited him and Karen on a week-long yacht trip to relax a bit. The woman was initially reluctant since the sailboat was associated with the tragic news of her daughter's death. But throughout the year, she had been crying and investigating, and it was an opportunity to escape her disturbing thoughts for a while. The entire family, including Karen, Jim, his brother Ken, and Ken's wife, enjoyed a whole week of the sights and sounds of the sea. As soon as they docked on the coast, they were informed that the Coast Guard was trying to contact them because there was a family emergency. Karen's thoughts flashed back a year. The heartbreaking memories of Bonnie returned. She thought something had happened to her child again, but this time, the news was not for her but for Jim and Ken. The brothers were told their father had died of a heart attack. None of them could believe it, as they had just congratulated him on his 63rd birthday days earlier. And he was fine. Thus, a sea voyage had twice become a harbinger of terrible news for this family. Karen's other children had gone through a lot. They had not only lost their sister but practically their mother as well. Unfortunately, their mother's life was filled with finding the person responsible for Bonnie's death. They did not get the attention they deserved, and Karen could not give up the investigation because she felt that if she did not get justice for her daughter, she would betray her. Yet she also felt the case would never be solved. Years passed, the children grew up, and Karen became a grandmother for the first time to Adam's youngest son, who needed a corneal transplant as his eyesight deteriorated. After the surgery, the boy was blind in one eye. Karen married Jim, and after years of marriage, they separated. During this time, her brother and mother, who had held everything together, passed away. But none of this could outweigh the pain of losing Bonnie. No one could count the sleepless nights. panic attacks, or outbursts of anger, or imagine how deep the depression was that the mother and the entire family of the deceased girl experienced. On January 5, 2007, 12 years later, Karen was traveling around the world with her friend. In a hotel on a small island in the Caribbean, she was just checking her emails when she came across one from an unknown sender titled, Bonnie. Her heart sank. The case was still unsolved at that time, and now it was in the hands of a new team of investigators. They matched the DNA sample from Bonnie's swab with a new database and found a match. The man was imprisoned for a series of armed robberies in Yuma. Upon a preliminary background check, it turned out that this man was in Alaska at the time of Bonnie's death. The man's name was Kenneth Dion. He was born in 1969 and was 25 at the time of the tragedy. His DNA had been entered into the database in late 2006. His name had never come up before in connection with Bonnie. The man had a martial arts belt and had won prizes at various competitions. He also served in the U.S. Army for a time, from which he was discharged for using prohibited substances. Kenneth often carried things like a grappling hook, a large rake, a 3-section martial arts staff, and nunchaku in his car. The man had been in and out of prison several times, and on that tragic day for Bonnie, he had only been out of jail for a few months before being locked up again for violating his probation. In May 2007, Dion was charged with the assault and murder of Bonnie Craig. The man allegedly attacked the girl on her way to a bus stop, hit her several times with a martial arts tool, committed a sexual offense, and threw her body off a cliff in a park. When the information about Bonnie went public, more facts came to light. This man was no stranger to breaking the law. He had been convicted 18 times, 10 for misdemeanors and twice for felonies. If his DNA had been in the database earlier, the case would have been closed. After Kenneth was extradited, he filed several pretrial motions, delaying the case by years. It was an incredibly challenging time for the whole family. Every time they had to attend a hearing, it felt like they were losing Bonnie all over again. The barely healed wound began to bleed. 17 years after Bonnie's death, in 2011, Kenneth Dion was sentenced to 124 years in prison, 99 years for murder and 25 years for assaulting the girl. Kenneth himself showed no remorse and never admitted to his crime. If he reaches the age of 80, he could be released on parole. Bonnie was an athletic girl. Perhaps she could have overpowered him somehow, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. We will never know exactly what happened to Bonnie that early September morning, but her death has changed the lives of many people around her. The younger sister, Samantha, became a 911 dispatcher, and the older brother, Jason, graduated as a paramedic. Karen still can't believe that her Bonnie will never be by her side again. To honor her daughter, she wrote a book titled, Justice for Bonnie, which recounts some moments from this story. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.